Hey everyone, this is Terry Miller with the Des Moines, Iowa User Group. This last week at the user group meeting, we had the distinct privilege of hosting Steve Molis. He is one of the most recognized names in the Salesforce ecosystem, and we were so excited to have him present, and we wanted to share his presentation with you all here. I hope that you enjoy it.
Okay, everyone. I am so excited about our next speaker, our featured presentation. You probably owe our featured speaker a beer. If you've been in the Salesforce community, you've seen an answer from him. He is a legend. He is known as the fixer of stuff. He is an MVP. He is an ally. He is one of the most recognized names in the ecosystem. He didn't approve this introduction, so I'm just throwing stuff out there, and he may have more credentials he wants to share. It's Steve Mo.
Thanks. Hi everybody, and thanks so much for having me. So I just want to share a presentation. I call it my formulas and admin life hacks. And it's just a bunch of stuff that I've kind of like accumulated over the years as a self-taught Salesforce admin. I just want to share with you guys. So hopefully this goes better than, if anybody remembers Virtual Dreaming back in like June or July. I was doing a presentation at Virtual Dreaming like in the middle of the night, and I was about 10 minutes in, and then somebody pointed out that I was still on slide one. And so, like Virtual Dreaming, the windows were super, super tight. So I had to go all the way back to like my first slide and try and shove 45 minutes of content into now a 25-minute window. It did not go well. Hopefully it goes better than that. So hopefully you should be seeing my title slide, I hope-ish. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, you're good. Looks good.
Okay. All right. So, like I said, this is kind of just like a collection of stuff that I've accumulated over the years through trial and error, mostly through error. Tell you a little bit about myself. I am a Salesforce MVP like Paul, also a member of the Power of Us Hub, the nonprofit community for Salesforce. Last year, I finally became a Trailhead Ranger, finally got that 100th Trailhead badge. And also, community college dropout. I went to Bunker Hill Community College in Charlestown, Massachusetts, where I flunked out after one semester with a 0.67 GPA. Been a self-taught Salesforce admin. Been with the same company for about 25 years now. And back in 2003, I had just wrapped up a little project, and my boss pointed at me and said, okay, sales is getting this thing called Salesforce, and you're going to take it over. It's going to be about 25 users, just password resets. And I joked that I started with 25 users and it was 25% of my time, and now I've got 450 users and it's 450% of my time. But I think things worked out pretty well. And I'm also a world's record holder. I hold the world's record for the most times a speaker at Dreamforce has dropped the F-bomb during their presentation. The previous record was 0, held by every other speaker before or since. And so with that in mind, I'm sure you're familiar if you've been to Dreamforce with the forward-looking statement, or formerly known as the safe harbor statement. So Salesforce has told me I need to have my own safe harbor slide. We are doing remote learning at so my daughter's upstairs. I will try to keep it rated G today. So I call this my formulas and admin life hacks, and just a bunch of formulas I want to share with you. And the first one I want to share with you is this one. I built this to answer somebody's question on the Salesforce Answers community, and they needed to calculate the percent of business days that are remaining in the month so that they could do prorated invoicing. And this is the formula that I built for them. It's hands down the most complicated formula I've ever built. I can't believe it actually worked. I can't believe I snuck it in under the 5K compile size limit. And next to it, that's a real thing. That's not fake. That is a Victorinox Swiss Champ VATX. It costs $450. It got 84 tools, and it weighs almost 1 pound. And this is my favorite formula in the whole world. I did not come up with this one. This is the Power of One. My opinion is the greatest formula ever written. It was written by a guy named Tom Tobin from Salesforce, and he taught it to me. And next to it is my favorite pocket knife. It opens bottles of beer and it opens bottles of wine. And I use it every single day, just like the Power of One. I use it in every report, every dashboard. When I create a custom object, it's the first custom field I add to that object. And the formulas that I'm going to show you are like this. Simple but powerful formulas that you can use every day, whether you're on Lightning or Classic, no matter what edition of Salesforce you're on, Group, Essentials, Unlimited. They'll work on any standard object, any custom objects, simple, powerful formulas that you can just plug and play right into your org every single day. So I'm going to show you how to use some basic math to simplify formulas, how to use formula fields for dynamic report filters that you just set them and forget them, a formula to return the name of the ultimate parent account for really nice, clean pipeline reports and list views and stuff like that, and a little trick you can use to test your validation rule formula logic before you deploy it. So the first one actually came from a question that was posted in the Answers community. This was posted by a guy named Bart Ward. And Bart was trying to create a validation rule that would block users from rolling an opportunity backwards to a previous stage. See, for Bart's company, the stages were like milestones. A deal could only move forward to its inevitable closure as a win or a loss. A deal couldn't be cultivated, then have the proposal submitted, and then go back to cultivation. It could go forward to the close lost or onward until it ultimately is won, but it couldn't go backwards. So he was trying to write a validation rule to prevent that. And he actually posted his first attempt at writing that validation rule. Now, he was using a function called isPickVal. In my solution, I used a function called case. Now, isPickVal is a perfectly good function. It basically is sole purpose is to evaluate a pick list field and return a result that you specify. But you can also see from Bart's screenshot that he had 17 stages in his sales process. I figured out he would have needed over 150 if-is-pick vals to cover every possible combination of stages in previously selected stage. This doesn't even come close to what he actually would have needed to build, but this is pretty close in concept to what he would have needed to do. Like I said, isPickVal is a perfectly good function, but it's not the most efficient function, especially when you have a whole list of values you're looking for. With isPickVal, it's like asking your Alexa, Alexa, are there zombies outside? Okay, run. Alexa, is it hot outside? Okay, let's go to the beach. Alexa, is it warm outside? Alexa, is it raining outside? Alexa, is it snowing outside? Case behaves a lot like isPickVal, but it's much more efficient. You go to the pick list field one time with your list of values you're looking for, your list of actions to perform in one step. So using case, I pulled in the stage field and the API, very important if you're just getting into formulas. When you're writing a formula, you need to use what is called the API field name, not necessarily the field name or the field label you see on a record when you're looking at it. The API field name of opportunity stage is actually stage name with a capital S and a capital N and no blank space in between. So I insert the stage into my case function. Now, as an admin, I have access to the setup and config. I can see the entire list of pick list values in the stage pick list field. So I copy and paste them into the formula, put quotation marks around all of them because they are text. Then, starting at the very first stage, I return the number 1. The second stage, I return the number 2. The third stage, I return number 3. Now, Bart had 17 stages, so I couldn't, even using 4-point font, I couldn't fit them all into one slide. So I'm basically turning words into numbers. That's all I'm doing. The first stage is equal to number 1. The last stage is equal to the number 6. Then I took this chunk of formula that I wrote and I copied and pasted it back into the formula editor, but around my second case statement, I wrapped a prior value function around the stage. So now I'm getting the previous value that occupied that stage pick list field, and I'm turning that again into a number. And then in between my two case statements, this is all one formula, I inserted a less than mathematic operator. I may have flunked out of community college, but even I know that number 1 is less than the number 2, 3, and 4, and the number 2 is less than the number 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm just turning words into numbers and doing simple, basic math. And the cool thing about this is the same question has come up again and again in the answers community, but with slightly different requirements. And with a few tweaks, you can use this formula. Some people say, I need to prevent my users from skipping over stages, going straight from qualification to closed one. Simple. You turn that less than operator to a greater than operator, and at the end of the second case statement, you just add a +1. If the new stage is more than one greater than the previous stage, the user is blocked from saving the record. They can only move forward one stage at a time. Or maybe your stages aren't always sequential. Maybe there's some latitude. Maybe they're tiered or plateaued. Maybe a deal can move back and forth between like proposal submitted and maybe the proposal needs to be redone and resubmitted. So you want to be able to slide back and forth. Simple. You make your third, fourth, and fifth stages all equal to the number 3. Now they can slide back and forth so the proposal can be resubmitted and reviewed again, but it can't go all the way back to cultivation. Again, you're using case to turn words into numbers, and then it becomes nothing more than a basic math problem. Now this next one, I'm going to show you how to create some simple but easy formulas, but powerful formulas that allow you to create dynamic report and list view filters. So this first one, again, came from a question that was posted in the answers community. This one was posted by Sophie Curtis. And Sophie had kind of a unique requirement. See, where she worked, her company had this process where a group of users would create activity records, but then assign them to other users. But they needed to be able to run a report and see what the status of those activities were that they had assigned to the other users. Now, and Sophie wanted to create one single report that any user could run that would show what the status of their activities currently is. Now, if you've ever created a report or a list view in Salesforce, you know that there's that default set of filters, my activities, my accounts, my contacts, my leads, my opportunities. Well, the me in my is the user who owns those records. What Salesforce is doing is it's taking the user ID of the person running that report and the user ID in the owner field on those records, and it's returning the ones that match. But for Sophie, the people who created those records are no longer the owner. So she needed something like that, but she needed to call in the ID of the person who created that record, not necessarily the same person who owns that record now. And she didn't want to create a separate report for every single person on this team. And then a month later, they add a custom field to the object. So now she has to add that field to 20, 30 different reports. Or maybe they decide, the report, it's got this chat in it and it's a donut. And we don't like the donut anymore. We want to make it a funnel. So now she's got to update 20, 30 reports just to change a chat from a donut to a funnel. She wanted one report that anyone could use anytime, and it would show their activities that they created and what the status was. So to do this, I created a custom formula field on the activity object. I selected checkbox as my result type. Now, if you look real close at the post, you can see that my first attempt at this, I used number as my result type. When she posted this question back in 2011, formulas that return a checkbox were not even a thing. The only thing you could do was return a number or a word. But along came formula checkboxes, so I did make an update to this formula. So the field I referenced is the created by ID field, which is on every single record in Salesforce, every single object in Salesforce, and a thing called $user ID. Now, if you've ever created a formula, validation rule, workflow rule, formula field, and you click the insert field button in the formula editor, you'll notice that like the object that you're on is always at the top, and there's the list of fields on that object in the panel next to it. But below it, there's all these things with dollar signs. Those are global variables. And there's a global variable called $user. $user represents whatever user is logged in at that moment in that session. If we were all in the exact same org right now, and I'm logged in and I'm creating a record, I'm $user. If Pearl is logged in and she's looking at a report, she's $user. If Karen is editing a record, she's $user. Every single one of us is $user in that session. So all I did is I created a formula field that returned a checkbox result, true or false, and I get the $user ID, the ID of the user who's running that report or looking at that list view, and the ID of the user who created that record. And I'm using an equal sign. And if they match, my formula returns a true or checked checkbox. Otherwise, it returns an unchecked checkbox. Now, word of advice, no matter how simple your formula is or how good you think you are at writing formulas, always create a report or a list view that shows the fields your formula is evaluating side by side with your formula field result. And I can see that every record that I created, whether I own that record or not, has a checkbox next to it. So I know my formula is working. Now I can use this as a report filter, a list view filter, and with one report, anyone can see any record that they created, whether they own it or not. Simple, it's a simple formula checkbox. I'm just comparing two IDs to each other. That's all I'm doing. But it's a powerful formula that you can now turn on any report. You can use it as a dashboard filter. You can use it, and it will work on any field that holds the user ID. It doesn't have to be created by. It could be last modified by. It could be a custom lookup user field. And it doesn't have to be the user ID. It could be the user profile. It could be the user role. It could be a custom field on the user object. Any number of things. Simple but powerful. So this next one came from person Kelly Knudsen, and she had a kind of unique requirement, a little bit similar to Sophie's, in that she wanted to create a report that would show what her month-to-date sales were, side by side, comparing that month to the previous months. And like Sophie, she wanted this report to be dynamic. She didn't want to have to edit the date range filters every single time she ran this report. She wanted to be able to just run this report any day of the week, any day of the month, any day of the year, and have this report automatically get all the sales up to that day of the current month and that same day of all the previous months, so she could see side by side where she is in comparison to that day a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, a year ago. So again, I used a formula field. On this case, was on the opportunity object, but you could use this on the case object, on the lead object, on a custom object. I created a formula field that again returns a checkbox result. So it's a simple true, false, unchecked, checked. I referenced the opportunity close date, and I used a function called day, a function called today, and a less than or equal mathematic operator. So if you've never done date or date time formulas before, there's some functions out there, and one of them is called today. And what today does, it just literally returns whatever the current day is. That's it. Today with a left paren, right paren. There's nothing else in the function. If I created a date formula field and put today left paren, right paren in that formula, hit save and look at a record, that formula is going to return October 29th, 2020. If I go back tomorrow and look at that exact same record, it's going to show October 30th. And we go back the next day, it's going to show October 31st. And the day after that, it's going to show November 1st. That's what today does. It gets today's date. Now, the day function evaluates a date field or a date value, and it returns the number of that day of the month. If we wrap the day function around opportunity close date, and the opportunity close date is April 1st, 2019, it's going to display the number 1. It doesn't care about 2019. It doesn't care about April. It's just going to return the number 1. If we wrap it around an opportunity close date and the opportunity closed on December 31st, 2018, doesn't care about 2018. It doesn't care about the month. It's going to return the number 31. If we wrap the day function around the today function, it's going to give us the number 29. So I created a formula field on the opportunity object, but again, this could be cases, leads, any object we want. And I'm taking the day of the opportunity close date and comparing it to the day of today. And if the day the opportunity closed is less than or equal to today's day, then I return a true or checked checkbox. Otherwise, I return a false or unchecked checkbox. So day today is going to give us the number 29. If the opportunity closed on April 1st, 1 is less than 29. It's going to return a checked checkbox. If the opportunity closed on January 31st, even though it closed in January and we're now in October, 31 is not less than or equal to 29. It's going to give us a false or unchecked checkbox. And it's going to continue doing that up until Saturday when we rerun this report without doing anything. On Saturday, that checkbox will now be true because 31, October 31st, is less than or equal to January 31st. Simple, basic math. Now, the cool thing is, the second you hit save, this field is now available in every single standard report type of this object, including any existing reports we've already built off of that report type. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to build a new custom report type. We can grab any existing opportunity pipeline report we already have, click edit. There's our shiny brand new month-to-date checkbox field. We drag it in. We make this our report filter criteria. We say month-to-date checkbox equals true. Now we can run the report. I ran this report on the 10th of the month. And without any other filter criteria, I can see side by side, month by month, what my sales were on the first 10 days of that month and every month before that. And if I ran this exact same report right now, I would automatically see the sales for the first 29 days of the month. And on Monday morning, when we're in November, this report will automatically reset and show me all the sales up to the second day of the month. And the day after that, the third day of the month. I never have to touch this report ever again. The formula checkbox is doing all the work for me. And my users can use this formula checkbox field. And they never have to edit that report ever again. And it's just a checkbox. It's a checkbox that's comparing two numbers to each other. And when those two numbers match, it automatically sets itself from false to true. That's all it's doing. Now, the cool thing is, like, I built that for Kelly, and then within a couple of months, I had to do something similar for my org. But for my org, we're not very transactional like Kelly's is. So it's like the daily stuff that we don't run a lot of reports like that. Our sales cycles are very long, protracted. It takes, our average close is maybe 4 or 5 months. So our users wanted to see a report but they wanted to compare where they are up until the current day of this year compared to previous years. So they wanted to count the day of the year as their report filter. So I was able to take the same logic that I built for Kelly, but it was a little bit more complicated. So I used again the today function, another function called year, which behaves a lot like the day function, and again a function called date, and again a less than or equals mathematic operator. And again, this is just a formula checkbox field. So today returns the current date. Year, just like it's kind of like the cousin of the day function. It returns the 4-digit year of a date field or a date value. The date function allows you to build a date value by providing the 4-digit year, the 2-digit month, and the 2-digit day. So I knew that to solve this, I had to get the day of the year today is and the day of the year the opportunity closed and compare those two numbers to each other in my formula checkbox field. Now, if you've never done this before, I see a lot of people get tripped up on this in the ANSYS community. When you're trying to count the duration of the number of days, you need to subtract the earlier date from the later date. Some people get tripped up by that. So if I want to calculate what number day today is, I need to subtract January 1st, 2020 from October 29th, 2020, and that's going to give me the number 302. So the date function, like I said, it allows us to create a date by providing it with the 4-digit year, the 2-digit month, and the 2-digit day. So if I wanted to build a date value that would return New Year's Eve, New Year's Day 2020, I would just put in 2020, 01 for January, 01 for the 1st. If I wanted to do it for Christmas, 2020, 12/25. My birthday, 2020, 6/11. Now that's great for this year, but that year, 2020, it's hard coded in. So next year, I would need to edit this formula and change 2020 to 2021. And the year after that, I would need to edit these formulas and change 2021 to 2022. I want these to be dynamic. I don't want to have to edit these formulas or edit this report. So to make them dynamic, I use the today function to get today's date, and I use the year function to pull out that 4-digit year from today's date. And so now this will return New Year's Day any year, Christmas any year, my birthday any year. So, skip the slide. So here's my formula. Again, it's just a formula checkbox. So I'm counting the number of days from January 1st of whatever year this opportunity closed. That's going to give me what day of the year the opportunity closed. Then I'm doing the same thing, but I'm subtracting January 1st of this year from today. That's going to give me the number of the day that today's date is. So if the opportunity had a close date of February 15th, the formula is going to give me the number 45. If the opportunity had a close date of November 28th, it's going to give me the number 331. Subtracting January 1st from today, that's going to give me the number 302. So that opportunity that closed on February 15th, that's going to return a true checkbox because 45 is less than or equal to 302. That opportunity that closed on November 28th, that's going to give me an unchecked checkbox because 331 is not less than or equal to 302. And it's going to keep giving me an unchecked checkbox until we reach November 28th, 2020. And then magically, on November 28th, that checkbox is going to check itself. And so again, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can take any existing report that I already have, grab my close date year-to-date checkbox field, drop that in as my filter criteria. And again, I ran this report in June without changing any other filter criteria. This showed me all the opportunities, 2020, 2019, 2018, side by side, where I was up at the same point in time, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, compared to today. And if I ran this report right now, I would see where I was October 29th, 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, as far back as I have data. And I don't have to change anything in this report. And then in 2021, in January, the entire report will automatically reset and start with day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, all the way till the end of the year. And it's just a checkbox that is performing basic math. The formula field is doing all the work, so that your filter criteria is simply, is this checkbox checked or is it not checked? Simple formula. So this next one I call the ultimate parent account. So this one I actually had to build on my own org. Does anybody have account hierarchies on their org? Use that standard parent account lookup field on the account object to connect, like, headquarters with branches and subsidiaries, or maybe you're a nonprofit and you have like a chapter-based organization, something like that. And then you try to create an opportunity pipeline report that shows the revenue for the entire organization and all the branches, all the subsidiaries. And so you group it by that parent account lookup field. And then you get a mess like this. Octan is the parent of Lego and United Oil and Gas. Lego is the parent of Pyramid Construction. United Oil and Gas has 3 subsidiaries. So the Octan revenue is scattered all over this report. So maybe you try to add a chart to make sense of it all, and you get this. So hopefully your boss has a calculator that's got a red, orange, yellow, green, and blue button on it, so they can add up all the little segments to get the total Octan pipeline. I have a saying that when you build a report or a dashboard, if the person who's looking at that report or dashboard needs to pull out a piece of paper and a pencil or a calculator to figure out what that report or dashboard means, you built a crappy report. Reports is not something that I want to have on my resume. So how do I clean this mess up? How do I make sense of this? So I knew that I had to build a field that would somehow find the name of the very top account in the account hierarchy. But the problem is I got 25,000 accounts. Not every one of them has a parent account. In some cases, there is no account hierarchy at all. Some of those accounts are the top account in the hierarchy. Some of those accounts are the bottom account in the hierarchy, and some of those accounts are in the middle of the hierarchy. And I have no way of knowing what each of those 25,000 accounts is. So I knew I needed to somehow build a formula that would do all this for me. So I created a custom formula field on the account object. In this case, my formula is returning a text result because I'm returning the name of that top parent account. And to do this, I used a function called blank value. And I really can't tell this story without first giving a shout out to a guy named Deepak Anand. Now, if you've ever been on the Answers community, you've probably seen his stuff. In my opinion, Deepak Anand is the greatest of all time. His solutions are just incredible, and it's not just the level of complexity, the stuff that he's able to solve. It's also his attention to detail and the way that he explains what he did, why he did it, and how it works. He's just brilliant. And so one day he answered a question, and he did it using the blank value function. And in his explanation, the light bulb finally went off, and I finally figured out how the blank value function actually works. I'd say it's an old function that's been out there forever. I'd seen it, I'd read it in the online help and training, but I could never really wrap my head around what it really did and how I could actually use it in a formula. But in Deepak's explanation of his use of it in this solution, as we say here in Boston, dawn came to Marblehead. I finally knew what this thing really was and how I could use it. So I can't really do it justice, but I'll try. In a nutshell, what the blank value function does is it looks at the field, and if that field is blank, it allows you to provide a substitute to use in place of that blank field. Like, for example, you cannot divide by zero or nothing. It literally breaks the laws of mathematics. If you do it, your formula will return a pound sign and the word error in big bold letters because you can't divide by zero. So suppose you need to do a calculation where you're dividing the price of something by the quantity, but the quantity field, maybe it's not always filled in. So if quantity is empty and you use a formula like divide price by quantity, those empty records are going to display pound zero. So maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want to say, all right, if they leave it blank, just divide it by 1. So you wrap blank value around the quantity field, evaluate it, and if it's blank, you provide a 1 as the substitute. Now your formula will never break on you. It will either use the quantity as the divisor, or if the divisor is blank, it will use the number 1 as the divisor. Or maybe you have a due date, but it's the due date might be blank, and so you can provide a substitute and say, like, all right, if the due date is empty, just take the start date, and the default will be 7 days after the start date. Or maybe you don't know if you owe me a beer. Well, guess what? You do. That's the way blank value works in a nutshell. So I need to build a formula field on the account object. And so I use the insert field button in the formula editor. And like I said about the one for the global variables, when you click on that the object in the top, there's the panel on the right, it has the list of fields in it. When you scroll through that, if you see a greater than sign next to a field name, that means that that field is a lookup. And you can step through that lookup field. So I scrolled until I found the parent account lookup field on the account object, and I clicked through it. Then another panel opens up. I'm now in the parent account record. So I scrolled until I found the parent account field on the parent account record, and I clicked through that. Now I'm in the parent account of the parent account. Then I scrolled through that and found that parent account lookup field. Then I clicked through that and found that parent account lookup field. I kept on clicking through and through and through, up and up and up. Now, before I built this formula, I did some research and I found that the highest account hierarchy that I had in my company was 4 levels. So I built myself a buffer and I went up 6 levels. I just kept clicking through and through and through, up and up and up until I got to the parent, 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 and I got the account name. But like I said before, I got 25,000 accounts in my org. Not every one of them has a parent. Not every one of them is a parent. Some of them might be the parent, the grandparent, the great-great-grandparent, the great-great-grandchild. So when I go all the way up there 6 levels, there may not be anything in that account name. So using blank value, I provide a substitute. And so I go up 5 levels and get that name, but that might be blank. So I provide a substitute using blank value, and I go up 4 levels and get that name. But if that's blank, I go up 3 levels and get that name. And if that's blank, I go up 2 levels and get that name. And if that's blank, I go up 1 level and get that name. And I know that if I have gone up 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 levels, and every single one of them is blank, then I must be on the top account in the hierarchy, or there is no hierarchy at all, which means that I am on the ultimate parent, in which case, just give me the name of the account that I'm on right now. And then I close the whole thing out with a bunch of right parens. And just like the other formulas, second I hit save, this is the exact same report we started with. My ultimate parent account name is now available for me to add. So I grab that and I swap that for the standard parent account lookup field, and I use that as my report grouping. This is the exact same report we started with. I can now see that for the entire Octan Corporation pipeline, including Octan and every single one of its subsidiaries, that there is $6.9 million in the pipeline. And for Warnham, Hagen, Dunder Mifflin, I can see that there's $2.7 million in the pipeline. And all the revenue is in one nice, neat bar for Octan and one nice, neat bar for Warnham Hog. You don't have to have the calculator that's got red, green, orange, yellow, and blue buttons on it. And our standalone companies, Three Stooges, Initech, Midstate Office Supply, they're no longer on the island of misfit toys in this nameless, faceless report grouping. Because they are the top account in the hierarchy, their name is now displayed in the ultimate parent account group. And they don't show up in this nameless, faceless stack in the report chart. It's just a simple formula text field using nothing more than a nested blank value function. That's all I'm doing. I'm going up, and if it's not there, I use a substitute. If that's not there, I use a substitute. If that's not there, I use a substitute. That's all I'm doing. So this last one is a little trick that I kind of stumbled onto a while back when I was making some changes to an existing validation rule. If you ever create a formula field, a validation rule, a workflow rule trigger, or even process builder, in the formula editor, there's that check syntax button. So you build your formula, you click check syntax, and hopefully you get the green message, not the red one. There's no syntax errors. You're not using an invalid function or a field that doesn't exist, and you're under the 5K compile size. The problem is that you're not home free. You're only about halfway there. The check syntax button only does that. It checks the syntax. It makes sure that you're under the 5K compile size limit. Make sure that you're not using an invalid function or a field that doesn't exist on that object, that you're not missing a comma or a paren or have too many commas or too many parens. But it doesn't check the logic. And I may have flunked out of community college, but even I know that A plus B divided by C and A plus B divided by C, they're both syntactically correct, but they can give you totally different and in some cases potentially bad results. But there's no check logic button in the formula editor. So how do you test your logic? So validation rules are Boolean. Either a record passes the validation rule or it fails the validation rule. And so are checkboxes. Either the checkbox is true or false, a 0 or a 1, wax on, wax off. So what I did is I created a custom formula field on the object. I selected formula as my data type and checkbox as my result. Now, what I do is I take my validation rule formula and I put it in my formula checkbox field. And if it returns a checked checkbox, that means that the record will fail the validation rule. If it returns an unchecked checkbox, that means the record would pass the validation rule. So suppose I needed to create a validation rule that prevented users from saving an open opportunity where the close date was in the past. Now, once an opportunity is closed, whether it's a win or a loss, that's okay. Close date can be whenever. So that we need to pass those. But if the opportunity is open and the close date is less than today, we want that record to fail. Now, we might write the formula like this. The close date's less than today. The stage is not closed won or not closed lost. I happen to use, I'm an and or guy. Some people, they use ampersands and pipes. You can use the text function to convert the stage from a pick list value into a text value. So you can use less than or equals or not equals operators. There's a million ways you could write this formula. So we've got our formula, but before we activate this validation rule, we want to make sure that it's not only syntactically correct, but that it's also logically correct. So we put it into, instead of the validation rule and activate it, we put it into my formula checkbox field. I check the syntax, so I know my syntax is good, but now I want to check my logic. I want to check my results. So again, if the formula returns a checked checkbox, that means the record would fail the validation rule. If the record returns of unchecked checkbox, that means the record will pass the validation rule. So now I create a report or a list view that shows the fields my formula is evaluating side by side and my formula checkbox field. And right away, I can see that I've got a problem. I've got closed won and closed lost opportunities with a checked checkbox. They should be exempt from my validation rule because when a deal's closed, after the close date, shipping might have to edit that opportunity and put in the FedEx tracking number. Accounts receivable might have to edit that opportunity and put in the payment date or the invoice number. If they try to do that and I deploy this validation rule right now, when they go to hit save, they'll be blocked. They'll get an error message saying, you can't edit this opportunity. The close date is in the past. But that's when the deal closed. They just want to do their job. They just want to put in the tracking number or the invoice number or the payment date. They're supposed to be exempt from this validation rule. So does anyone want to take a guess as to like what I did wrong in my, I think I gave away the secret right there. Anybody want to take a guess what I did wrong in my formulas? And the same thing is wrong in both of them. The ands and ors and the pipes doesn't matter. It's the same flaw in both formulas. Nobody take it. Nobody has a guess. There are no prizes, by the way. I have no swag.
It should be and instead of or.
Winner, chicken dinner. Who was that?
Anna.
Anna, you are correct. When I put the or in these formulas, I doomed the user to fail because opportunity stage is a pick list, not a multi-select pick list. A user can only pick one thing and one thing only. So when the user picked closed won, they were doomed to fail because they didn't also pick closed lost. And if they had picked closed lost, they were doomed to fail because they didn't at the exact same time open another monitor with another mouse and also click closed won. They can't do it unless they're Schrodinger's cat, in which case all bets are off. So to fix this, I go back to my formula, I remove my or, wrap the whole thing inside of one and, or if you're an ampersand person, you'd write it like this. Now I put this formula in my formula checkbox field. Again, I check the syntax. My syntax is good. And again, a true checkbox means it fails. A false checkbox means it passes. Now I go back to my report on my list view. The only two records that have a checkbox are the ones that should have a checkbox. Open opportunities with a close date in the past. And now I know that this validation rule is safe to deploy, safe to activate. Shipping can do their job. Accounts receivable can do their job. And opportunity owners can't save an open opportunity with a lapsed close date. Now, a couple of caveats. Not every function that's available in a validation rule formula is available in a formula field. So you can't use is new, is change, prior value, VLOOKUP. Don't think you can use regex, but you can either comment those lines out of your formula when you put it in the checkbox field, or just remove them and then put them back in. And you can test the rest of your formula logic. Or in the case of our formula, we didn't have any of these functions in there. We could test the whole thing and then deploy it. And you don't need one of these checkbox fields for every single formula. You just need one on each object to test your validation rules that you're deploying on that object. You just need them as like, it's like a one last final step that I do before I actually deploy and activate a validation rule. So that's all I have. Hope you guys liked it. And I know I kind of blew through it. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I didn't want to stop at each point for Q&A because sometimes that can go a little bit off the rails and then you run out of time. But if we have time, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions anyone has. And I did share this deck too, so you guys will be able to have a copy. You can, a lot of the formulas, you'll be able to copy and paste right into your org.
I have uploaded it to our community site, so it's ready to download for anybody that needs it.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Steve before we let him go? Seen lots of that was awesome in the chat. Sorry, go ahead.
That was a lot to unpack. I always like, I got one eye on the clock and I'm like, I want to make sure I get it in, but I also want to make sure I don't just blow through it. So yeah, if anybody thinks of anything they saw that they have a question about, like why I did something as opposed to another way of doing it. Because in that last example, that's a perfect example. There are probably, I'd guess, a dozen syntactically and logically correct ways to write a validation rule that will do what those requirements were. I mean, is the close date less than today? Is the opportunity open? There's dozens of ways to say that, and they're all perfectly valid. And around the ands and ors, this comes up a lot in the answers community. What's the best way? The best way is consistent. The best way is what makes sense to you, how you think, and how you write. That's the best way. If I'm an and or guy, if ampersands and pipes make sense to you, the only thing I say is don't mix and match. I've seen this before. People will post questions and it will be this hodgepodge of and, double pipe, ampersand, or and ampersand, double, and it's like trying to read a ransom note from newspaper clippings written in pig Latin. It really is. I mean, and sometimes it's like you inherit an org, and the previous admin was an ampersand pipe guy. You're and or. I would say take that formula, unless that admin is still there, and you come to some kind of an agreement on how to write things, and like I said, they both work, but just the mix and match, try and avoid that. Either if it's a previous formula, break it down, figure out what it's doing, what it did, and then update it. If you're the sole owner of formulas, make it your own. Convert to what you like to write in. But again, I have never heard anything about performance of one over the other. If there is, it would be trivial, the difference in performance. I've never heard anything like that. There's two things that in formulas. There's a compile size limit. That is how much the function takes to run and how many times you're calling a field, how many times you're calling a function. There is a character limit. The compile size is 5K. The character limit is either 3,700 or 3,900. That's the actual number of keystrokes that make up your formula. So some people think when they get the 5K compile size limit, it's like, oh, I got some blank spaces. Let me take them out of my formula. You're not reducing your compile size. You're reducing your character count. So if you did hit the 39K limit, the 3,900 limit, you would be reducing your character count. But they are two different things. That's one, double ampersand versus A and D. Okay, that's character. That's one place where if you hit that limit and you're really close, like one or two could be the tipping point, that actually would be an argument for switching from one to the other. But I've yet to see that.
So, Lib, you had a question, it looked like?
Yeah. So, Steve, we had a similar requirement of the ultimate parent account name. You mentioned that you knew that 4 would be the highest number in your account hierarchy. We did not know, and it has been 7 years when I wrote that logic. I read it on the Salesforce limitation article that when you say parent and then you say parent dot parent, that is counted towards 2 count towards the cross object reference.
Yeah, that is like in addition to compile size and character count, there is, when you get into cross object references, there is a spanning limit, and I don't know off the top of my head what it is. It's somewhere up around 9, 10, 11. So
Yep.
you could, if you have a really tall account hierarchy, like a chapter based organization, like AAA. You got AAA, you got your regionals, your state levels, local offices, some nonprofits. Getting it down into the chapter based, like like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. You got BSA and GSA, all the way down to the troop. If depending on how detailed you get with your account hierarchy, you could push it. So you do have to be mindful. Now the thing is, in the formula editor, when you hit that limit, you will get the error message there. That is, I guess, the nice thing. You know up front that you hit the limit. You know, it's not like divide by 0. So dividing, Salesforce does not run that query on every single record and say, oh, by the way, you got these records have 0 in it, so you're going to get a pound error because they're going to break the laws of mathematics. No, you want to divide a number by a number. That's syntactically correct. Salesforce will let you build that formula. It's only when you run it that you'll see the pound errors. At least with Ultimate Parent, you won't get the pound error. You'll get it in the formula editor, and then you've got to, it'll tell you flat out, look, you're spanning too many objects. You're traversing too many tiers. And then, probably Flow would be your best bet. I mean, they've done amazing stuff with Flow Builder in the last couple of releases. I'm dipping my toe in the Flow water, but not a Flownatic by any means. Maybe someday, but luckily there are some great people in the community on Flow. Jennifer Lee from the Boston area, she's amazing. Mark Ross, who now works for Salesforce, incredible. I mean, Brian Kwong. Those are 3 of the best people that I know in the entire world at Flow Technology, and they're more than happy to share their knowledge. Great resources in the community.
Yep. So we did something similar. We created a direct lookup on the account and wrote code to find the ultimate parent directly. And then definitely we use the blank value as part of a formula.
Yeah, there's ways around it. Some you can hitting the 5K compile size limit is not a death sentence. Sometimes it means that a formula field is no longer an option. But I've seen a number of times where people hit the 5K compile size limit, and they can take your formula that breaks the 5K compile size limit, and with minor tweaks, you create a workflow rule or a process or a flow that takes your existing formula and you use that as a field action to update a non-formula field. Your formula is returning text, or your formula is returning a number or currency, or a checked or unchecked checkbox. You can usually, with some minor tweaks, take your existing formula that you're using in a formula field, drop that into a field update action, and you can get past the 5K compile size limit. The only trick is that formulas are dynamic. Workflow rules and processes need a triggering event, a human being or a process physically editing that record and saving it and committing it to the database, or creating and saving that record. Whereas formulas like my date value formula checkbox fields that have day less than or equals to today. That formula is just sitting there every day, watching the calendar click by. And when the calendar reaches that magic day, it springs to life and changes from unchecked to checked. Processes and workflows, flows, you need a triggering event. So you do have to be careful there. But the thing is, if your formula field is evaluating something like a checkbox field or a pick list field instead of a relative date like today, like close date or something like that, a human being has to check a checkbox. A human being has to log in and select a value from a pick list field. So you can easily say, like, well, when a person edits this record, changes this pick list field, then kick off my field update action and go through and do my stuff. So there's ways around it. You're not dead in the water necessarily by the 5K compile size limit.
Yep, that is true. And I have a suggestion to make on the first formula you showed regarding the opportunity stage names.
Mm-hmm.
We had a similar request. So when we started our Salesforce instance, we started with the first one line of business. And as Salesforce grew in our organization, we introduced another line of businesses. And nobody liked the stage names the other line of business was using.
Oh, I've been there, yeah.
Yeah. So what we did instead of using, and by the way, your solution of using cases is great. But what we did, we used the probability, because probability and stage name, they go hand in hand.
Yeah. There are instances, though, you can, depending on how you have your org configured, some organizations, they do allow for the probability to be editable because, and we've gone through this ourselves in our own organization, then we went away from it, but we wanted someone, we wanted to be able to make probability more accurate. So stage, for a lot of companies, stage is like where in the process the deal is. And sometimes like you've been told by the prospect that you're on the short list, but you know or have it on good authority that they are with an incumbent who they've got a long-standing relationship with, and that you, in all likelihood, are just being played against them so that they can get a better price from their existing vendor. They're just like, hey, we're just so you know, we're looking at these other guys over here. Oh, whoa, we can give you like 2% off on that, and then like you're just being played. So in that case, we allow users to say, yes, we are on the short list, but we know that our actual likelihood of winning this deal is only 20% or 10%. So in that case, but if your organization probability and stage are in lockstep, yeah, certainly you can do that. And we actually went because we actually ran into problems by trying to decouple stage and probability, and so we ended up fully decoupling it by creating a whole separate pick list field called confidence that users can do that. Like, yeah, I know that we're a finalist, but I also know that there's almost no way in hell that they're going to leave their current. So I mean, I'm putting the probability at like 1. But yeah, you can certainly homogenize, because I ran into that myself. I mean, when I started 2003 on Salesforce, and I just made some bad decisions that I regretted. We onboarded more users, more teams. The teams had their own way of doing things, their own way of selling, and so they wanted their own stages, their own sales processes. So I gave it to them because I was just the admin and they were the SVP of that team. And then the next thing I know, I looked up and I had 5 sales processes, each one with their own custom stage names. And there were 7 different versions of the word won and 15 versions of a closed lost.
Yeah,
and
I can relate to it.
32 flavors of in between. And I was just like, never again. I mean, luckily we actually did. We went through the exercise. We sent out a cease and desist and said, look, we're all one company. This is our sales model. Deal with it. You get 7 stages. That's it. So, yeah, but yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes you do have to, you do have to support multiple sales processes, multiple series of sets of stages, and you've got to figure out a way to homogenize them some way, somehow.
Steve, I was looking back over your presentation today, and I didn't catch any actual swears or
well,
curses. So
credit to Millie. She's our daughter. She's upstairs just wrapping up her remote learning.
Oh, I see. Oh, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today. This was awesome. I know I learned stuff. I've seen a lot in the chat about people loving this. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. Hopefully, when things return to some semblance of normal, hopefully I can do this in person.
And that'd be awesome. I'll have you again.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.